I didn't answer the phone the first time it rang. Unknown number. Middle of the afternoon. Those calls are never good news. They're surveys, scammers, or reminders of bills you already know you can't pay. So I let it ring. The second call came less than a minute later. That's what made me stop folding the laundry. There was something patient about it. Not urgent. Not aggressive. Like someone who already knew they'd eventually reach me. "Hello," I said. The man on the other end spoke carefully, as if every word had been rehearsed. "Am I speaking with Margaret Hale?" "Yes. My name is Daniel Price. I'm calling from Commonwealth Trust Bank regarding a dormant account associated with your name." I smiled without humor and leaned against the counter. "There's been a mistake," I said. "I don't have any dormant accounts." He didn't argue. He didn't rush to correct me. "That's what most beneficiaries say at first," he replied. The word beneficiaries settled into my chest like a weight. "I think you should know," he continued. "The account was opened in 2004. It's remained inactive since 2009. The current balance is approximately $540,000. I stopped breathing. $540,000. I was 34 years old. I had never seen 5 figures in one place, let alone 6. "I think you have the wrong person," I whispered. "I don't," he said gently. "The account was opened by your grandfather." The kitchen felt suddenly smaller. My grandfather had been dead for 15 years. 15 years of hearing the same sentence repeated like fact, like law, like something carved into stone. Grandpa left nothing. That's what they said at the will reading. That's what my mother said every time money came up. That's what my uncle reminded us whenever someone struggled. He didn't have anything, they said. He lived simply. There was nothing to pass down. I believed them. Because why wouldn't I? I was 19 when Grandpa died. Still a kid. Still trusting. Still assuming adults told the truth because they were adults. "Can you confirm your date of birth?" Daniel asked. I did. He exhaled softly. "The account lists you as the sole beneficiary." I slid down into the kitchen chair. Sole beneficiary. Not my mother. Not my uncle. Not my older brother. Me. The quiet one. The one who sat beside Grandpa at family gatherings while everyone else argued or showed off. The one who listened when he told the same stories twice. "I don't understand," I said. "Why wasn't I told?" Daniel paused. "That's not unusual," he said carefully. "If no one files a claim, the bank doesn't intervene. The account simply waits. Waits. Like Grandpa had." I hung up after scheduling a meeting, my hands shaking just enough to notice. I didn't cry. I stared at the wall above the sink, the faint crack from the time my mother slammed a cabinet door so hard it split the plaster. And suddenly, memories began rearranging themselves. My mother insisting on handling all of Grandpa's affairs. Her irritation whenever I asked questions. The way she snapped. "What do you think there was?" Nothing. I had believed that word. Nothing. But Grandpa was never a man who did things without reason. That night, I couldn't sleep. Because for the first time, a thought crept in that scared me more than the money itself. What if they knew? And if they did? What else had they decided I didn't deserve to know? The thing about lies told over many years is that they stop feeling like lies. They become family history. They become background noise. They become the explanation for why things turned out the way they did. After Grandpa's funeral, the story was simple and clean. There was nothing. No savings. No insurance worth mentioning. No hidden plans. Just a modest house that went to my uncle, because he needs it more, and a few personal belongings divided quickly, before grief could turn into questions. I remember the will reading clearly because of how fast it was. No dramatic pauses. No thick envelope. No tension. The lawyer, someone I had never seen before and would never see again, sat at the edge of our dining table and spoke like he was reading grocery items. Your father did not leave behind significant assets. That sentence ended the conversation before it began. My mother nodded, already emotional, already offended at the idea that anyone might doubt her. My uncle sighed heavily, as if he had expected more but didn't want to seem greedy. My brother checked his phone. And me. I stayed quiet. I was 19. Fresh out of high school. Still believing that if something important existed, adults would naturally tell you. After that day, the phrase, "Grandpa left nothing," followed me everywhere. When I dropped out of college for a semester because I couldn't afford tuition, my mother shrugged. If your grandfather had planned better, maybe things would have been easier. When I worked 2 jobs and still borrowed money for rent, my uncle shook his head. He was a proud man. Didn't believe in banks. At holidays, when cousins compared vacations and new cars, someone always said it like a punchline. Too bad Grandpa wasn't rich, huh? Everyone laughed. Including me. Because what else do you do when the same explanation is repeated enough times? You stop questioning it. But now, after that phone call, those memories started changing shape. Not the facts. The tone. I remembered how quickly my mother took charge after the funeral. "I'll handle the paperwork," she said sharply, cutting off my aunt when she asked about the house. I remembered how defensive she became when I once asked if Grandpa had ever talked about money. "What are you hoping for?" she snapped. "There's nothing. Nothing." The word felt different now. That night, I pulled out an old box from the back of my closet. Inside were things I hadn't touched in years. Birthday cards. A faded photo of me and Grandpa at the county fair. Notes written in his careful, slightly slanted handwriting. He always wrote more to me than to anyone else. Not grand declarations. Small observations. You notice more than people think. Listening will take you further than talking. At the time, they felt like encouragement. Now, they felt like instructions. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying moments I'd dismissed for years. How Grandpa used to ask me questions when no one else did. How he once joked, "You'll understand someday," when my uncle interrupted us. How he insisted on walking me to the bus stop, even when he was tired. He wasn't careless. He was intentional. And intentional people don't accidentally leave $500,000 behind. The more I thought about it, the less sense the official story made. Grandpa had worked for the same manufacturing company for over 30 years. He'd been careful. Methodical. He kept records of everything, receipts, warranties, manuals for appliances he'd owned for decades. But somehow, no savings? I didn't confront anyone yet. Not because I was afraid. Because I wanted to be sure. Over the next few days, I started paying attention in ways I never had before. At dinner with my mother, I casually mentioned the bank had reached out about old records. Her fork paused mid-air. "Banks are always calling," she said too quickly. "Probably spam." She didn't ask which bank. She didn't ask why. When I mentioned Grandpa's name, her jaw tightened just slightly before she changed the subject. I notice things like that now. At a family gathering, I listened instead of speaking. My uncle joked about money troubles, then added, "At least there's nothing from Dad to argue over." No one laughed. Elaine shifted uncomfortably. My brother stared into his drink. Silence filled the space where a joke should have landed. That's when it hit me. They weren't confident. They were rehearsed. And rehearsed stories usually exist for one reason. Because the truth would be harder to keep straight. That night, I wrote a list. Not accusations. Questions. Who handled Grandpa's mail after his death? Who had access to his documents? Why was no lawyer consulted beyond that one afternoon? Every answer pointed back to the same place. My mother. I didn't feel angry yet. I felt something colder. A realization that settled slowly and refused to leave. For 15 years, I had shaped my life around a story that wasn't mine. A story told to me, not for me. And if the bank hadn't called, I never would have known. That's what hurt the most. Not the money. The certainty that they were perfectly content letting me believe I was worth nothing. I didn't rush to the bank the next morning. That surprised me. You'd think learning there was $500,000 in your name would light a fire under you. That you'd drop everything and run straight toward it. But what I felt wasn't excitement. It was suspicion. Because money doesn't sit untouched for 15 years by accident. And families don't repeat the same story for 15 years unless they're afraid of something changing. So instead of moving forward, I looked backward. I took a day off work and drove to the old part of town where Grandpa's house still stood. My uncle lived there now, though he'd remodeled it enough that it barely felt like the place I remembered. I didn't knock. I parked across the street and just sat there, watching. The porch where Grandpa used to drink his coffee was gone. The maple tree he planted had been cut down. Even the mailbox was new. Erased. That word came back again. Erased. On the drive home, I stopped by the storage facility near the highway, the one Grandpa used briefly near the end of his life. I remembered because he once joked about renting space for secrets. At the front desk, I asked casually if they kept old records. The clerk shrugged. We purge after 10 years. 10 years. Grandpa died 15 years ago. Too late. Still, I asked questions. About who closed the unit. About payment methods. Cash, the clerk said after checking an archived log. Paid out in full. That detail mattered more than it should have. Cash leaves no trail. The pattern was forming now, even if I didn't want to admit it yet. I went home and opened my laptop. I searched public records. Death filings. Property transfers. Anything with Grandpa's name on it. There it was. A change of address request filed 2 weeks after his funeral. Mail forwarded. Not to my uncle's house. To my mother's. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Mail doesn't forward itself. Someone had filled out that form. Someone had signed it. Someone had made sure anything official went through their hands first. And suddenly, the lawyer at the will reading didn't feel like an authority anymore. He felt like a prop. I thought back to that afternoon. The way he avoided eye contact. How quickly he packed up his briefcase. How no one asked for a copy of the will. Because maybe there wasn't one. Not a complete one, anyway. I called the bank the next day. Daniel greeted me like he'd been expecting it. We can verify everything in person, he said. Bring identification. We'll review the documents together. His calm reassured me more than any promise of money could have. At the bank, the office felt smaller than I remembered from my childhood. Less intimidating. More precise. Daniel laid out the paperwork carefully. Account opening forms. Signature cards. A beneficiary designation dated 3 years before Grandpa's death. My name was there. Not typed. Handwritten. I knew his handwriting. Those loops. That slant. This was never changed. I asked. No, Daniel said. There were no amendments. No secondary beneficiaries. What happens when someone dies and no one reports it? I asked. The account remains dormant, he said. We don't distribute funds without a claim. And if someone intercepts the mail? I asked quietly. Daniel paused. Then no claim is made. The words hung between us. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't need to. Because the truth was assembling itself, piece by piece, without emotion. Someone had known about the account. They hadn't touched it, because touching it would have left fingerprints. Instead, they buried it under silence. I left the bank with copies of everything. Not originals. Evidence. That night, I laid the documents out on my dining table. I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity. For years, I'd thought I was unlucky. That I just hadn't gotten a good start. That some people were born with safety nets and I simply wasn't one of them. But luck had nothing to do with this. This was choice. A series of deliberate decisions made by people who believed they were entitled to decide what I knew, what I deserved, and what I could handle. I realized something else then. If I confronted them now, they'd deny it. Cry. Deflect. Blame confusion. Grief. They'd rewrite the story again. So I decided to do what Grandpa had taught me, without ever saying it out loud. I would listen. I would watch. And I would let them reveal themselves. Because people always do. Especially when they think the past is safely buried. Once you know a secret, the world changes shape around it. Conversations slow down. Faces become louder than words. And silence, real silence, starts saying things people never intended to reveal. I didn't announce what I knew. I tested it. At my mother's house the following Sunday, I arrived early, carrying a pie like nothing had changed. The kitchen smelled the same, overcooked vegetables and lemon cleaner, but the air felt tighter. We sat at the table, the two of us, making small talk. Work. Weather. Nothing important. Then, as casually as I could manage, I said, I had to update some old records this week. Grandpa's name came up. Her hand stilled around her coffee mug. Oh, she said. Why would that matter now? I shrugged. Banks keep things forever. She laughed. Too quickly. Too sharp. They make mistakes all the time, she said. I wouldn't waste energy on that. Energy. As if curiosity were a flaw. I watched her closely as she spoke. She didn't ask which bank. She didn't ask what records. She just dismissed it outright, like someone swatting away a fly they already knew was there. Later that week, I mentioned something similar at a family dinner. Nothing specific. Nothing threatening. Just a sentence. I've been sorting through Grandpa's old things lately. It's strange how much paperwork he kept. The reaction was immediate. My uncle shifted in his chair. Elaine suddenly found her napkin fascinating. My brother looked at my mother, then back at his plate. No one responded. That silence told me more than any confession ever could. If Grandpa truly left nothing, this would have been harmless nostalgia. Instead, it felt like I'd pulled on a loose thread. After dinner, my uncle pulled me aside. Why are you digging this stuff up? He asked, his voice low. I met his eyes. Why wouldn't I? He hesitated. It's been a long time. Best to let things stay buried. Buried. That word again. I smiled faintly. Some things don't stay that way. I didn't say it like a threat. I said it like a fact. Over the next few weeks, their behavior shifted in small, telling ways. My mother called more often. Asked about my job. Offered help she'd never offered before. My uncle joked nervously whenever Grandpa came up. Elaine avoided me entirely. They were circling. Waiting to see what I'd do. What they didn't realize was that I wasn't preparing a confrontation. I was preparing control. I requested copies of Grandpa's death certificate. Filed a formal beneficiary claim with the bank. Opened a new account, separate from anything my family could access or track. Daniel walked me through everything calmly. You don't need anyone else's permission, he said. Legally, this is straightforward. Legally. That word grounded me. Because for so long, the family narrative had been louder than the law. One evening, my mother invited me over alone. She made my favorite meal. Sat across from me, hands folded. You seem distant lately, she said. Is something wrong? I studied her face. This was the woman who raised me. Who taught me right from wrong. Who also believed she knew better than anyone else what I could handle. I'm just thinking, I said. About what? About how we tell stories, I replied. And how sometimes they become more important than the truth. Her eyes hardened. There's nothing to revisit, she said. Your grandfather didn't leave anything behind. We all accepted that. Accepted. As if agreement made it real. I nodded slowly. You accepted it, I said. I didn't know I had a choice. Her lips parted, just slightly. For the first time, she looked unsure. That night, as I drove home, I realized something crucial. They weren't afraid of losing money. They were afraid of losing control over the story. Because once the truth came out, the version of themselves they'd lived with for 15 years would collapse. And people will do anything, say anything, to protect the version of themselves that lets them sleep at night. I didn't expose them yet. I didn't need to. The bank had already confirmed the transfer was in progress. The money was moving. Silently. Legally. Irreversibly. And while they tried to hold the past together with rehearsed phrases and nervous smiles, they had no idea what was already set in motion. I didn't plan the confrontation the way people expect. There was no dramatic announcement. No angry phone calls. No ultimatum. I invited them to dinner. All of them. A simple message in the family group chat. I'm cooking this Sunday. It's been a while since we were all together. No one declined. That alone told me everything. They arrived with wine bottles and careful smiles. The kind you wear when you know something is wrong but don't know exactly what. My mother hugged me a little too tightly. My uncle avoided my eyes. Elaine stayed close to my brother, whispering. We ate. Talked about safe things. Work. Weather. A neighbor's renovation. I let them relax. Then, after dessert, I stood and cleared the table slowly. I placed a single folder in the center. Not slammed. Not hidden. Just placed. I went to the bank, I said calmly. No one spoke. My mother's fingers tightened around her napkin. They found Grandpa's account, I continued. It was dormant. Inactive. For 15 years. Elaine gasped softly. My uncle swore under his breath. My brother looked between them, confused. There was nothing, my mother said sharply. We went over this. I slid the beneficiary document across the table. My name faced them. Handwritten. Dated. Silence filled the room like water. This wasn't an accident, I said. Mail was forwarded. Records were intercepted. No claim was ever filed. My mother stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. This is ridiculous, she said. You don't understand what that time was like. I understand exactly, I replied. I didn't raise my voice. That's what unsettled them. You decided what I could know, I said. You decided what I deserved. And you were comfortable letting me believe Grandpa left me nothing. My uncle rubbed his face. Elaine stared at the table. My brother finally spoke. You knew. No one answered him. That silence was the confession. My mother's shoulders sagged. I was protecting the family, she said. From what? I asked. From fighting. From greed. From tearing ourselves apart. I nodded slowly. So you chose me instead. She looked up, startled. You chose me to go without, I continued. To struggle. To believe I was unlucky. Her mouth opened, then closed. She had no defense left. I didn't take the money, she said weakly. I know, I replied. That's the part that hurts most. Because stealing would have been simpler. Instead, they buried it. Erased it. Left it untouched because touching it would have exposed them. I gathered the papers back into the folder. The funds are being transferred, I said. Legally. There's nothing to contest. No one argued. They couldn't. I looked around the table. At the people who had shaped my childhood, my beliefs, my sense of worth. I won't pretend this didn't happen, I said. But I'm not here to punish anyone. That surprised them. I'm here to tell you something, I continued. This ends now. The story ends now. I stood. I was never invisible, I said. You just treated me that way. I left before anyone could respond. I didn't wait for apologies. Some truths don't need closure. They just need daylight. The money arrived on a Tuesday morning. No fanfare. No announcement. Just a notification on my phone while I was standing in line for coffee. For a moment, I didn't move. I stared at the number, half expecting it to disappear. Not because I doubted the bank, but because part of me had lived so long without safety that the idea of having it felt unreal. $540,000. Grandpa's final sentence. Written without words. I didn't tell anyone. Not my family. Not my coworkers. Not even my closest friend at first. Because for once, something in my life belonged only to me. The first thing I did wasn't something dramatic. I paid off my debts. Student loans. Credit cards. The quiet anxieties that followed me into every room. Each confirmation email felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. Then I did something I hadn't expected. I drove back to Grandpa's old neighborhood. The house my uncle still lived in sat there, changed and polished, but heavy with memory. I didn't knock. I didn't confront him. I just sat in my car and let myself remember. How Grandpa used to stand in the doorway when I left. How he waved until I turned the corner. How he once said, "People think loudness means strength. It doesn't." That sentence stayed with me. I met with a lawyer, not to fight, but to protect. A trust. Clear boundaries. No ambiguity. I wasn't going to repeat the mistakes that had been made with me. Then came the part that mattered most. I set aside a portion of the money, not as charity, not as guilt, but as purpose. I created a small scholarship fund in Grandpa's name. Not for the loudest students. Not for the most impressive resumes. For the quiet ones. The observers. The kids who listen more than they speak. The ones families often overlook. When the scholarship launched, I invited my family to the opening ceremony. Not out of spite. Out of honesty. They came. My mother sat in the front row, hands folded tightly. My uncle stood near the back. Elaine kept her distance. No one spoke much. A simple plaque hung by the entrance. For those who listen. In honor of a man who noticed. I watched my mother read it. She didn't cry. But her shoulders shook slightly, just once. After the ceremony, she approached me. "I didn't know he thought of you that way," she said quietly. I met her gaze. "He always did." She nodded, like someone finally understanding a language they'd ignored for years. There was no apology. I didn't need one. Because justice isn't about watching someone fall. It's about standing somewhere they can no longer reach you. That night, I went home to my apartment, soon to be sold, soon to be replaced by something chosen instead of endured. I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window. For the first time in my adult life, the future didn't feel like something I had to survive. It felt like something I could shape. And I realized then that Grandpa's greatest gift wasn't the money. It was the way he trusted me to handle the truth. Eventually. He waited. And so had the account. People ask me now if everything feels different. If the money changed my life. I always pause before answering. Because the truth is, it didn't change who I was. It revealed who I'd been all along. For 15 years, I lived inside a story that told me I was unlucky. That I started behind because there was nothing waiting for me. That struggling was just my nature. But that story was never mine. It was handed to me. Maintained for convenience. Protected by silence. When Grandpa chose me, he didn't do it because I was special in the way families usually measure worth. I wasn't loud. I wasn't demanding. I wasn't impressive. I listened. I noticed. I remembered. And that mattered to him more than anyone realized. My relationship with my family didn't end after that dinner. It changed. There are fewer calls now. Fewer assumptions. Fewer decisions made for me. My mother still tells the old story sometimes, but she tells it softer now, like she knows it can't survive daylight. And I don't correct her. Because I don't need to. I live in a different version of the truth now. One where my choices aren't filtered through what others think I can handle. Sometimes, late at night, I take out one of Grandpa's old cards. The paper is worn. The ink slightly faded. You'll understand someday. I do now. He didn't leave me money. He left me confirmation. That I wasn't invisible. That I was seen. That silence, when chosen, can be strength. And while they spent 15 years believing nothing had been left behind, they had no idea what he'd already set in motion. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.